Section 15 of Confessions, Volumes 1 and 2. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Confessions, Volumes 1 and 2, by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Anonymously translated. Section 15. At length, sufficiently instructed and disposed to the will of my masters, I was led in procession to the metropolitan church of St. John, to make a solemn abjuration, and undergo a ceremony made use of on these occasions, which, though not baptism, is very similar, and serves to persuade the people that Protestants are not Christians. I was clothed in a kind of grey robe, decorated with white Brandenburgs. Two men, one behind, the other before me, carried copper basins which they kept striking with a key, and in which those who were charitably disposed put their alms, according as they found themselves influenced by religion or goodwill for the new convert. In a word, nothing of Catholic pageantry was omitted that could render the solemnity edifying to the populace or humiliating to me. The white dress might have been serviceable, but as I had not the honour to be either Moor or Jew, they did not think fit to compliment me with it. The affair did not end here. I must now go to the Inquisition to be absolved from the dreadful sin of heresy, and return to the bosom of the Church with the same ceremony to which Henry IV was subjected by his ambassador. The air and manner of the Right Reverend Father Inquisitor was by no means calculated to dissipate the secret horror that seized my spirits on entering this holy mansion. After several questions relative to my faith, situation, and family, he asked me bluntly if my mother was damned. Terror repressed the first gust of indignation. This gave me time to recollect myself, and I answered, I hope not, for God might have enlightened her last moments. The monk made no reply, but his silence was attended with a look by no means expressive of approbation. All these ceremonies ended, the very moment I flattered myself I should be plentifully provided for, they exhorted me to continue a good Christian, and live in obedience to the grace I had received. Then, wishing me good fortune, with rather more than 20 francs of small money in my pocket, the produce of the above-mentioned collection, turned me out, shut the door on me, and I saw no more of them. Thus, in a moment, all my flattering expectations were at an end, and nothing remained from my interested conversion but the remembrance of having been made both a dupe and an apostate. It is easy to imagine what a sudden revolution was produced in my ideas, when every brilliant expectation of making a fortune terminated by seeing myself plunged into the completest misery. In the morning I was deliberating what palace I should inhabit. Before night I was reduced to seek my lodging in the street. It may be supposed that I gave myself up to the most violent transports of despair, rendered more bitter by a consciousness that my own folly had reduced me to these extremities. But the truth is, I experienced none of these disagreeable sensations. I had passed 2 months in absolute confinement. This was new to me. I was now emancipated, and the sentiment I felt most forcibly was joy at my recovered liberty. After a slavery which had appeared tedious, I was again master of my time and actions, in a great city, abundant in resources, crowded with people of fortune, to whom my merits and talents could not fail to recommend me. I had sufficient time before me to expect this good fortune, for my 20 livres seemed an inexhaustible treasure which I might dispose of without rendering an account of to any one. It was the first time I had found myself so rich, and far from giving way to melancholy reflections, I only adopted other hopes, in which self-love was by no means a loser. Never did I feel so great a degree of confidence and security. I looked on my fortune as already made, and was pleased to think I should have no one but myself to thank for the acquisition of it. The first thing I did was to satisfy my curiosity by rambling all over the city, and I seemed to consider it as a confirmation of my liberty. I went to see the soldiers mount guard, and was delighted with their military accoutrement. I followed processions, and was pleased with the solemn music of the priests. I next went to see the king's palace, which I approached with awe, but seeing others enter, I followed their example, and no one prevented me. Perhaps I owed this favour to the small parcel I carried under my arm. Be that as it may, I conceived a high opinion of my consequence from this circumstance, and already thought myself an inhabitant there. The weather was hot. I had walked about till I was both fatigued and hungry. Wishing for some refreshment, I went into a milk house. They brought me some cream cheese curds and whey, and 2 slices of that excellent Piedmont bread which I prefer to any other, and for 5 or 6 sous I had one of the most delicious meals I ever recollect to have made. It was time to seek a lodging. As I already knew enough of the Piedmontese language to make myself understood, this was a work of no great difficulty, and I had so much prudence that I wished to adapt it rather to the state of my purse than to the bent of my inclinations. In the course of my inquiries, I was informed that a soldier's wife in Pau Street furnished lodgings to servants out of place at only 1 sou a night, and finding one of her poor beds disengaged, I took possession of it. She was young and newly married, though she already had 5 or 6 children. Mother, children, and lodgers all slept in the same chamber, and it continued thus while I remained there. She was good-natured, swore like a carman, and wore neither cap nor handkerchief, but she had a gentle heart, was officious, and to me both kind and serviceable. For several days I gave myself up to the pleasures of independence and curiosity. I continued wandering about the city and its environs, examining every object that seemed curious or new, and indeed most things had that appearance to a young novice. I never omitted visiting the court, and assisted regularly every morning at the king's mass. I thought it a great honor to be in the same chapel with this prince and his retinue, but my passion for music, which now began to make its appearance, was a greater incentive than the splendor of the court, which, soon seen and always the same, presently lost its attraction. The King of Sardinia had at that time the best music in Europe. Sommi, Desjardins, and the Bezzuzzi shone there alternately. All these were not necessary to fascinate a youth whom the sound of the most simple instrument, provided it was just, transported with joy. Magnificence only produced a stupid admiration. Without any violent desire to partake of it, my thoughts were principally employed in observing whether any young princess was present that merited my homage, and from whom I could make the heroine of a romance. Meantime, I was on the point of beginning one, in a less elevated sphere, it is true, but where, could I have brought it to a conclusion, I should have found pleasures 1,000 times more delicious. Though I lived with the strictest economy, my purse insensibly grew lighter. This economy was, however, less the effect of prudence than that love of simplicity, which, even to this day, the use of the most expensive tables has not been able to vitiate. Nothing, in my idea, either at that time or since, could exceed a rustic repast. Give me milk, vegetables, eggs, and brown bread, with tolerable wine, and I shall always think myself sumptuously regaled. A good appetite will furnish out the rest, if the maîtres d'hôtel, with a number of unnecessary footmen, do not satiate me with their important attentions. 5 or 6 sous would then procure me a more agreeable meal than as many livres would have done since. I was abstemious, therefore, for want of a temptation to be otherwise. Though I do not know but I am wrong to call this abstinence, for with my pears, new cheese, bread, and some glasses of Montferrat wine, which you might have cut with a knife, I was the greatest of epicures. Notwithstanding my expenses were very moderate, it was possible to see the end of 20 livres. I was every day more convinced of this, and, spite of the giddiness of youth, my apprehensions for the future amounted almost to terror. All my castles in the air were vanished, and I became sensible of the necessity of seeking some occupation that would procure me a subsistence. Even this was a work of difficulty. I thought of my engraving, but knew too little of it to be employed as a journeyman, nor do masters abound in Turin. I resolved, therefore, till something better presented itself, to go from shop to shop, offering to engrave ciphers or coats of arms on pieces of plate, etc., and hoped to get employment by working at a low price, or taking what they chose to give me. Even this expedient did not answer my expectations. Almost all my applications were ineffectual, the little I procured being hardly sufficient to produce a few scanty meals. Section 15. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.